the devil doesn't come to you with horns and a tail. He looked glamorous and beautiful and inviting. It was a beautiful $3,000 hotel room. At one point I was using like $500 a day. And I know this because I'd wait at the ATM at midnight. The walls were black. I had a fish called Pish, and the fish was like dying because of the smoke that sat on the top of the water. I tried to wipe the walls down and I smudged it. So if you can imagine this cream colour, empty, very, very dirty place that I tried to clean up. And I was weighing 39 kilos. There was an old vandalised church. The voice spoke, "Get up and go home, my child."
Mm-hmm.
And I just, in a mess, said, "I got no more home, look at me."
I need to know to get to where I want to go. Welcome to the Feck No More show, Andrea.
Yeah, thank you so much, Colleen. It's great to be here.
I've got to know your story over the last few weeks and months. It's one of those ones where it's a complete 360. You turn your life completely around. Do you want to introduce yourself to our guests and our listeners?
Sure. My name's Andrea Simmons. I'm a mother of two. My daughters are mothers themselves nowadays.
Yeah. Take me back to what life is like before your Feck No More moment.
I raised a family quite young, had several businesses, moved to the Gold Coast 25 years ago now, and semi-retired, opened a few businesses and went through a fairly challenging time in my marriage. There was a lot of financial, stress when we had a business go a little bit sour and we had to rebuild. Just went through a fairly hard time within the marriage, and after 21 years of marriage, went through a separation. There was quite a bit of, in my upbringing, there was quite a bit of, domestic violence in terms of within my childhood upbringing. And after 17, 18 years of marriage, that happened again within my marriage. So it became quite, irrational and dangerous to be within that marriage. But I was clearly not able to put some real strong, fences of love around myself within that marriage. And things went south. And I went through a separation. I hid for a season, after that separation, and didn't want to be found, I just wanted everything to stop. I just wanted to start again.
You've just left, and as you said, you were in that new season of your life and you withdrew from everything at that point. Can you give us a little bit more of a description of what that was like for you in that season of withdrawing from that previous marriage and that in-between stage? What's going through your mind at that point?
After 21 years of marriage and the domestic violence that was happening, the abuse, and also finding out, that my ex had other stuff going on in the background with other women. I was gutted. I was angry. I had put so much time and I had given up my life for this marriage and this family. 21 years, I served that family so diligently, day and night. I was, to be honest, when I fell pregnant, and finishing at 12, I wanted to go into the Victorian College of the Arts, and my plan was to move to England and pursue my musical theatre career. And, I felt like I had given all of that up, because I fell pregnant and to raise the family, and then 21 years of, dedicating myself to that, for it to come to this. And I was angry. I was really angry. I just wanted to change my life. And I thought, everyone, when they're young, all my friends were going out and I had this baby and, they're all partying and doing life. And I, not that I resented it, but I never had that opportunity. And so when, this point in my life, it was like, I felt free. I felt free for the first time in a long time, and I felt like I could do whatever I wanted, and that, I could conquer the world. I could do whatever, I could experience whatever I wanted to experience, and nobody was there to stop me or to tell me how I was supposed to live, how I was supposed to behave. So, I wasn't a role model mother, or I wasn't being, cooking somebody's dinner or, or doing that. I was just free from all of that and just being me.
So there was quite a couple of different stages from moving from the angriness whenever the relationship first breaks down into that freedom stage. How long does that period kind of last from, going from where I suppose it's the uncertainty, the chaos of what comes next to the feeling free and, looking forward with the rest of your life? How long's that period?
Be honest with you, Glenn, and I often hear like stories of men saying, "Oh, I didn't know we had a problem." Like it didn't happen like then. The problem had been growing since we were 7 years married, and it was something that had grown into a snowball. So I think it was progressive. I was getting angrier and angrier, and I was, becoming resentful, and every time the abuse escalated, there was a lot of fear there as well. And so it grew. When I went into hiding, it was, maybe 3 weeks, and then I started to feel free.
Okay.
Yeah, it was quite
so
quick.
it had been going for quite a while, so you were able to make that turnaround quite quick. Okay, that's good.
But in a sense, Glenn, I think after that I went into I want to rebel kind of stage. I didn't get to do all these things, and it was like I'm going to do it now. And I can do whatever I want.
Now I'm going to live my life. Yeah, that makes perfect sense, especially whenever you settle down so young. Where does that freedom take you on your journey? What comes next for you at that point?
Well, I moved into a unit with my mum, my youngest daughter, and I picked up a part-time job at a laser clinic, and I'd always run my own business, but I guess they were blessed to have me. But I was blessed to have a job as well, and just I guess I wanted to fill my time up as well with something productive that I was doing instead of looking back into the past, just rebuilding something new. Then I was on social media, and I got a message from somebody that I used to know in Melbourne, who I used to work with. And he reached out, "Oh, do you remember me? We worked together at a location." And we started chatting, and one thing led to another, and I went down to Melbourne to visit for a weekend, and thinking, this man was a little bit younger than me, but very handsome, and thinking, wow, this, could be what my direction now. And, we got along like a house on fire, and there's lots of fun and excitement. Now as an adult, I get to choose, what I want in my life. And so, I went down to Melbourne to spend the weekends. It was a beautiful $3,000 hotel room. The guy was fairly wealthy, so I thought, had his life together, so I thought. And, in this $3,000 hotel room, he put on a glass table, pops a little glass pipe. And most people that I tell my story to, I go, the devil doesn't come to you with horns and a tail. He looked glamorous and beautiful and inviting, and here was this poison or doorway that I had no idea was going to open. I would step into, and it would take me into a descent into hell. He popped this on the table and said, "Oh, would you like one?" And I instantly said, "Mate, I don't do drugs. Happy to have a few drinks, but I've just not that person." And he said, stood before me looking quite handsome and saying, "I look okay, don't I? It's just going to make you relax. It's okay." This was a whole new, I guess, relationship for me. I'd been married for 21 years. It was all a bit scary. He looked all right. It was just the smoke. And, my mind went straight away to, I smoke cigarettes anyway. I've tried, I have had a puff of marijuana before. It didn't kill me. How bad can this be? I won't indulge too much. I'll just have a puff and see how it feels. I don't want to be stick in the mud. Do you know what I mean? And, you embark stupidity or naivety or curiosity or, you can call it a lot of things, wanting to be loved, accepted in, 21 years of marriage. Everything I gave, I was rejected at. So you kind of could put a lot of psychology behind that. But it was really that, I guess, naive. And I didn't ask what it was. My mind just, it wasn't a needle or a pill that I couldn't control, it was just smoke. And, that was the beginning of, the descent into hell for me that day, that choice, that decision. It was crazy. It was a crazy.
Andrea, can I ask what age you were at that point? Like you've come out of the 21 years marriage, you're in mid-40s, is it? Is that what I'm
42.
42. Okay. So you're 42, never done drugs before. Is this the first time meeting this person that this is put on the table, or is it like further into the relationship whenever this first happens?
It's not that I hadn't done drugs before. I had tried marijuana in my younger teenage days, you kind of have a go. And but I wasn't a drug user. And so this person that I'd met, I had known he was one of my trainers at work.
Yeah.
So I knew him for 3 or 4 years at work, in a work context, and always thought, oh wow, he's so handsome, he's the kind of man I should have married. I was in this relationship that was abusive, and he was just like, if I had to paint a picture perfect guy, he would have been it. However, he was addicted to meth now, and I didn't know.
Okay. No. You're still quite early in your relationship whenever you try it then, is that it? Is it the first night, or is it?
It was the first night.
Oh, it was the first night. Yeah. You're the second person I've spoke to in the last 6 days that has said it was the first night, and he introduced her to it. What's your first experience of ice?
I have to be honest, and it was, all my inhibitions were gone. Everything, all my worries and problems were gone. It was just that moment was all that was there. And all of the the thought processing that happens, should I be doing this? You think about things as you're living your life. Is this the kind of person I want in my life, or should I be using this? Or all of that goes. All the separation, all the divorce, all the children, everything just disappeared. I felt a deeper freedom at that point, and like nobody talks about the sexual component that comes with this drug, meth. Nobody really goes there because it's a bit of taboo, but it is a sexual stimulant. So new relationship, this amazing handsome guy, and he gives me this thing to smoke, and like where I was very I wouldn't walk around my house without clothes on, even though I was married. I was very reserved, and all of that's gone out the window. Nothing, nothing of that existed. I just had this, freedom, and it just went. It was like stepping in out of myself and into a movie. That's what it felt like at that time. It's really strange to go that deep and explain all that. But it was like a freedom. And I remember, we used quite a few times that night, and then I wasn't able, or I didn't go, oh, maybe I shouldn't have any more. Like straight away, it hijacks your frontal lobe, which now I know, like where your processing takes place. But I'm like, I remember thinking, how, one puff won't hurt me, I'll just see what it feels like. And then I don't remember like any processing anymore. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. I also spoke with Simon a few months back, and he had said that as soon as he took it, it was like everything was amplified. So everything he was feeling at the time was just magnified. And he knew straight away that he was in trouble, that he needed more and more of this. Had you a similar feeling?
No, I didn't know from day one that I was in trouble. I remember the next day, because it affects your central nervous system, right? So the next day I was very jittery, like jelly inside. And I thought, oh, I don't like this feeling. But, this must be coming down, it must be coming down, or whatever we used. And I thought, I hope this doesn't last long. I hope it goes away, I hope it goes away quick. But I didn't think it would be something that, I didn't really think that it would be something that would be in my life. I thought, I just thought that was just something that we did, and that I couldn't believe some of the images of what I'd got up to that night, and I'm like, oh, okay, that was a bit brave of me, but oh well, I'm through that now. And it took me a day or two to stop the shaking inside feeling, and I really didn't give it another thought. To be honest, until he came up to the Gold Coast 3 weeks later, and I'd come back home, and he came up to the Gold Coast and brought some up with him. We got a hotel, and he scored a pipe at a local alcohol store.
Yeah.
And it was just that easy to get. I just couldn't believe it. And I thought, okay, well, he wants to do that again. And I remember the feeling that I first had, and I guess the sex and the feeling and the freedom and everything.
Yeah.
And, when it was there, I had to embark on it. I just knew I had to embark on it. It wasn't, that, I kept thinking about it all the time. It was just, it was there.
It was there.
However, I think, after that time, I was certainly couldn't wait to do it again. And it grows. It grows because, I think it was 6 weeks later I moved to Melbourne.
Okay. Yeah.
But I'm going to give this a go. I'm going to give it, a real go. And, and the first day I got there, it was on the table again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought, oh, well, I've got no kids to look after. I've got no responsibilities. I had money in my pocket, sold one of my houses. But then I did notice something really strange, because when I moved down there, I get to his place and he had no furniture.
Okay. That is a bit strange.
I used to live a pretty well-off life, so I had the best of most things. And I'm like, hey, dude, where's your furniture? Like, you've got a fridge and a mattress on the floor. Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
And he said, well, I went through a separation not too long ago. She took everything. And I'm like, okay, fair enough. And so I said, I'm moving here, so we're going to go shopping and I'm going to furnish the house. So I did furnish the house, and but it was just on. It was just on every day. And very, very quickly it took over my life.
So it starts becoming from once every 3 weeks, or 3 weeks to the first time, another 3 weeks or so to the next time, and then it starts becoming daily. And at that point, you said it's just taken over your life. What does that taking over your life look like, Andrea? Well, like, do you mean it was that you were thinking about it regularly, you wanted more? Was it, how did it take over the life, would you say?
Glenn, like, that's all we did. All we did was meth, like, and we were using, and we were up all night, and we were, walking the streets and driving the streets and walking dark parks and, going to places that I don't know how I walked out alive half of the time. I certainly think I had, God was looking after me, because I remember thinking once, I had this thought come through my mind, which was one of the very few thoughts while I was on. It was like, this must be what hell's like. Like, some of the scenes that I've been in and experienced, I remember thinking that, this must be, I didn't know this world existed. Like, it's almost like there's another world. And I remember, like, after trying to get clean, I remember starting to process some of these things where I'd been and thinking, oh my goodness, how did I get there? And thinking, I didn't know this world existed. It's like a dark world that exists among us that we don't see, but it's actually happening at the same time. And there's a lot of people involved in it.
Yeah.
It's just really, really dark. Like, and there's lots of, dealers and guns and, occult stuff, and like, it's horrible. When you think back later, but at the time you're not thinking. Like, people go, what were you thinking? And I go, well, I wasn't. You're not able to process. You're not thinking logic, rational decisions. You're not using that part of your brain. Your brain then starts operating on the midbrain, which they call the animal brain, and the animal brain will do whatever it needs to do to get the next 5 minutes of pleasure, even if it is hurting yourself and others you love.
Yeah. What's the big impact to the surrounding family at that stage? Were they aware that you're going through this, Andrea? Are they aware that you're struggling with addiction at that point in terms of that, or was it very much you're down in Melbourne, there in the Gold Coast, that's kind of hidden from it? What would that part of your life look like?
I don't know what happened. It's like I left my family. It's like I left everything, right? And I thought that I was keeping in regular touch with my daughter, because she was living with me and my mum, and it all just disappeared. So, and I remember calling my daughter once, and she said, Mum, I haven't heard from you. And I'm like, what do you mean? I called you just the other day. She goes, it's been 6 months. And so like you lose track of time and that anything else exists except for that moment, right? So my daughter was living with my mother in an apartment, a townhouse that I was paying half rent for. And my mum eventually said, look, this isn't going to work like this anymore. We're going to have to move. I can't, bring up your daughter. And I'm like, well, you do what you need to do and I'm doing what I need to do. And, she can find a roommate or she can find someone else to live with. And I don't even know how the house got packed up. Like, I don't even know till today. Like, everything just, I just up and left. Like,
so you really were disconnected from everything else that was kind of going on at the time.
And no thought about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, there was no, I wonder if my daughter's okay, or I kept paying the rent and the bills, but I was absent.
Yeah. And you're a mother for 21 years before the relationship breaks down. I'm guessing you were always a very attentive mother. Like that wasn't a new thing for you to go absent for so long and be so disconnected. Like I suppose looking back on that, Andrea, that must have been quite scary for you as well at that point, was it? Whenever you come out the other side and you start thinking, how did that happen?
I was a good mother. I was a really good mother. I was a dedicated mother. Like, I was just in the school stuff. I was always there for the family, and for the kids, I think it was a bigger shock. Because they would have been like, what is going on? Like, what happened? They didn't understand what was happening. And they just thought that, I lost the plot. Like, I was, I just didn't want that life anymore. So they were very, I guess, upset. And for me, like, it wasn't till years later when I was coming off it that I was faced with what I'd done and who I'd become and, what I'd put my family through. At the time, there was absolutely no thought.
There was no concept of what the damage that was doing or the things that was happening. Yeah. I think that's the scary. Yeah. I think that's the scary part of it, Andrea, for anybody with an addiction that totally transforms who they are, or the feelings that they're getting from it. I think that's always the risk. Look, I suppose from my perspective, I always wondered, why can he not stop this, or why can he not give it up? Why can he not be there more for the family? But in his mind, it was just, I need another drink. I need to be at the bar. So I can understand that very well in terms of you're going through that and you're in that phase. What's some of the worst places it took you to, would you say, in that? How long is the period that you're using for and stuck in that world?
It was a 2-year period.
2-year period? Yeah.
Just under 2 years, actually. It was just 18 months. And it was every day. It was every day. At one point I was using like $500 a day. And I know this because I'd wait at the ATM at midnight for my Centrelink to come through because I'd now run out of money, and I'd cash up my 500 and we'd go and get a score for the next 24 hours. And I'd be like, all of that just went. Now where am I going to get the next amount of money?
So the financial impact's quite huge on it as well. Over that space, you had went from being in a okay position, I'm guessing, if you've sold the house and a comfortable position, to waiting on the Centrelink coming through. Are you aware that that's happening? Like, or again, is it the same as the family? You're just, I don't care. Whatever it takes to get the next one. Yeah.
It's hard to understand, but you're not processing thought, like, logic, rational decisions. You're just, okay, I need this. It's like if you needed the next breath of air and I had you by the neck, you would just do whatever you needed to do to get that next breath. And so it was just that next thing. It was just the next thing. And there was nothing else existed,
Yeah.
And sometimes I would get all these bills and I'd be like, I can't deal with this. What's going on? Like, and my boyfriend would say, don't worry about that for now. Here, have another pot,
That was his face.
Everything else will go away. Yeah.
And in theory, it kind of does, until at some point reality always kind of catches up. 2-year period. It could have been, I suppose, a lot worse. I have spoke to people that have had 8 years, 10 years of their lives where it's just gone. So you've come out of it in a shorter space now. I'm interested to know in that 2-year places. What do you think was the worst impacts it had on you? What do you think was some of the darkest moments? Like, I'm guessing in between the highs, there must have been some downs. I'm guessing it's like, okay, we've got the fix, we're high now. At some point, there has to be the down. What were them moments like for you thinking back? Can you remember?
Look, there wasn't many down in that 2-year period. We just were
fairly
using
consistent.
and using, and it was a daily thing. A couple of times towards the end, we tried to, we don't want to do this anymore because the depletion of serotonin in the brain spikes up aggression and violence and anger, and it was starting to get a bit messy.
Yeah.
And so we were like, we've got to stop this, and we'd say that, and then 8 o'clock would come, and either I or he would cave. And so it was just, sometimes I'd be strong and he'd cave and vice versa. And I'm like, you couldn't have the stuff in front of you and the other one using it, just wasn't going to happen.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. The time that is went on, you were together the whole time. Was there many times along that journey that you did try to stop? You mentioned that, you had tried it a few times. Was there any where you were really like, this is it, and we've now got a little bit of a break? Or like, had you any prolonged period where you were able to get a break from it? No. So it was constant.
I couldn't understand. Like, honestly, it was just like, I don't know if you ever felt anxiety, but this anxiety was starting, this shaking and inside, and it's just like, okay, I don't want to use, and then it's like, well, I've got to, and you take off. Like, it's hard to explain. The only analogy I can put to it is if I, held your breath from you, eventually, you're just getting a little bit of air, and then you just, I
really like that analogy, that need to breathe, because it really gives the description of the urge that you have to do it. And again, for years, going back to my own situation, I always wondered what it was that kept driving, but it would have been the exact same urge. It would have been, I need this to survive. I need this to go forward. Where's the kind of point come then that you are able to break free in around that 2-year mark? What does that look like for you, Andrea? How does that come across?
I was living now in this empty apartment with no more furniture because we'd pawned it all. The walls were black. I had a fish called Pish, and the fish was like dying because of, the smoke that sat on the top of the water. I tried to wipe the walls down and I smudged it. So if you can imagine this cream color, empty, very, very dirty place that I tried to clean up. And I was weighing 39 kilos. My hair was falling out. My kidneys were bleeding. I had chipped my front tooth. I was scattered. I got lost in the streets in Melbourne. At the same time, I lost my phone. And I spent the day out on the curb crying, thinking, trying to find my way back, and I couldn't recognize how to get back. And I was looking for my phone, walking around, and people were kicking me off their lawn. I was thinking everyone was after me. People offered to come and, are you okay? And to offer me some help. I was sitting on a curb crying. And I thought they were all part of the conspiracy of the cameras chasing me, and the people that were after me. That I thought were after me. And now I know I was in psychosis. But then, the people that have made my phone go missing and that have made me get lost in the streets, and the cameras that were outside our window in the trees, and the people spying on us, the government spying on us, were all part of this, chasing me down. That was probably when I didn't remember, I didn't have people in Melbourne that I could call. I was lost and I didn't know how to get back. And I waited till dusk came, and I was still lost in the streets, and I was begging a man in the shop to, I don't know what to do. Please help me. I don't know where to go. And he said, I'm sorry, but you have to leave. And he closed his shop up. And I just looked, I was crying. And he said, I'll call you a cab if you want. Do you know where you have to go? I didn't have money or anything. And he called me a cab, and I waited there, and the cab came, and I said, I don't know my address, but it's Camberwell Road. There's this apartments that are like, they're orange. And he said, oh, I think I know where that is. And it was just around the corner. And I'd been lost the whole day around the corner.
Just around the block.
Where I lived, and I was a mess.
Andrea, the psychosis is something that's that's very close to me. And I can't really go into it too much on this podcast because it's not my story to share. But I have had somebody very, very close to me in psychosis. And looking at it from the outside, it's such a scary place to be, trying to help somebody that is there. And I can only imagine how scary it is whenever you're in the psychosis. Now, unfortunately, they were in it for quite a while. And quite a while they had to be admitted to hospital and stuff. But for you, was it a long period of time in the psychosis? Was it a short period of time in the psychosis? Like, what did that look like for you?
The psychosis came and went initially. I'd come in and out of it. And, but interestingly enough, right, 3 or 4 years into recovery, I still had little moments that I think a similar view, in my vision would happen, and I would trip out. So one of the psychoses was, the blinds, the Venetian blinds, and I'd spend all day looking through the Venetian blinds out the window all day, looking for these cameras, and I couldn't stop, and often have arguments, where he'd say, "Stop looking out the window," and I'm like, "I'm not," but I was, and I couldn't stop, and I'd see all kinds of things, and that my mind would imagine, and I'll, speak them out, and it's like, you're going nuts, this is, screwing with your brain, and I'd be like, "No, dude," and then until it got very scary. So I'm going out of that until it got very scary. So I was in recovery now 3 or 4 years down the track, and I was in a hotel because I went to Canberra to talk to the Premier, and the hotel had a similar blind, and I'm looking out this window and I got transfixed, and I'm like, whoa, I didn't want to go there, and I'm like, I'm not looking. I purposefully took myself out of the window
out of that situation
because I didn't want to get stuck in there again.
Yeah, it's a very scary experience, as I say, for the people watching and the loved ones watching it. But talking to the person that went through it, it's a scary time for them as well. So I totally get that. So you find your way back to the apartment. Is it then a case of, okay, something's got to change here? What does that look like for you? Where does your story take you?
It continued to go on for another while. I got back, and I was mad that he'd smoked up all the gear and
hadn't come look for you?
Didn't share it with me, and he didn't come look for me. Yeah, no, not at all. So anyway, we went and picked up again and just kept going. And it was, it would be days. And I remember once 8 days and we hadn't slept yet. 8 days, and, we were in an apartment building, so sliding door and everything we blacked all the doors, all the windows out because the cameras were outside. So we blacked all the windows out with some black plastic, and we'd sit there and just have the door open this much and just look out the windows, freezing, and just stay there as if we were spies, sitting for days. And and then just go out at night to pick up and go to some crazy places walk in the middle of parks in Melbourne City and end up in very gnarly spaces in St Kilda there that we were, which is like King's Cross, and it's just end up in some very crazy places.
Was there ever a time you really feared for your life in any of the places that you ended up in?
Yeah. At one point, I remember just becoming aware that, oh my God, I'm the only woman in here, and had some men move up closer to where I was sitting, and I'm like, oh my God, I think I've got to get out of here. This is not good. And another time in the dealer's house where he had, I didn't, looking back now, I think to myself, didn't I see all the paraphernalia there? Didn't I see the meth making kitchen? It's so evident now that because I work in the industry and I can see things for what it is, and I know what I'm looking at. But at the time, I didn't know what I was looking at. I just thought, ooh, these people are just really messy, and they're so dirty. But they were making meth. It was a bomb waiting to explode, and I'm sitting there in the midst of this. I'm thinking, this is insane, And I shared that today actually with some of my team. I sat there and I went, he went into the kitchen, and I said, I'm gonna steal some. Some in my pocket. This dude could have killed me and skinned me alive. And I what were you thinking? I'm sitting in this place where not long after I left, and it wasn't me, but this place got raided and he got deported. So I'm like, oh my goodness, there's been so many close calls that, where police have, pulled us over, and I'm like, oh my God, we got stash in the car, and my God, like I could go away for a long time, but I didn't get caught, and in fact now as we work in the youth prison, often I'll walk in there to see some of the youth and say the difference between you and me, dude, is that you got caught and I didn't, and we can use that as a relatability kind of,
as a connection
start
point.
a conversation. But honestly, sometimes I don't know how I made it out alive.
Well, I'm glad you made it out alive. And I know the people that you work with certainly will be glad that you've made it out the other end of it. What does coming out the other side of it look like for you, Andrea? How did you get to that point?
Before I go there, I have to tell you what escalated from there. So 2 years of meth using, and your body adjusts to the chemical, right? So you don't know why anymore. So you start to polyuse, and what have you given me? This stuff doesn't work anymore. So you're looking for the better fix, the better hit. But of course, your body
just got immune to it.
Adjusted it, so it's not doing what it used to anymore. So you're on a spiral down all the time, and like you can't stop it. And you're just wanting another hit, and so you have more and having more. And so I started. The dealer said, "Here, try some of this," and he gave me G. They call it G. Sometimes here they call it Fantasy or GHB, and it's 1 mil for every 10 kilos. And I thought I was weighing 50, which I usually weigh 55, and thought about 50. I'd lost a little bit of weight. I recognized that, but I didn't realize I was 39
just
kilos.
How much? Yeah.
And so he gave me 5 mils, and I had used it a couple of times, but the second time I took it, I remember like passing out on the bed and then coming back and thought, wow, what happened there? But then I used it again. Like, it just doesn't make any sense. And then I used it again, and this time I stopped breathing. So I downed this 5 mil, and I remember going down and not being able to take a breath. Everything stopped. And I remember my boyfriend started to shake me on the ground saying, breathe, breathe. And I opened my eyes, but I couldn't take a breath. It was like my lungs stopped responding to my brain. And I went out into the blackness again. And then I had water thrown on me. Breathe, he's saying, breathe. And I'm like, I couldn't.
I'm trying.
My brain couldn't tell my body to breathe. And I went out into the blackness again. And, as I did this 3 times, as I was going out the third time, I remember my dad said, I used to swim a lot in the ocean when I was young.
Yeah.
And my dad always said to me, if you're trying to help somebody and they're drowning, if they go down 3 times, don't let them go down the third time, because the third time they're gone.
Yeah.
And so, because I was quite a good swimmer. And so I remember going into the blackness the third time, and I'm like, okay, I'm dying. And so I remember distinctly thinking, crazy moment, when the plane's going down, everybody has a faith, and I didn't have a faith in God or anything. I was a spiritualist, Buddhist, I would call myself, of all things, I just want peace. But I certainly knew, like being Brazilian, there's a lot of spiritualism and, brought up in that environment. So, going into the blackness for the third time, not being able to breathe, I said to myself, or I said to God, if there is a God out there, forgive me for what I've become. Don't leave me here.
Yeah.
That was a vivid statement that I remember thinking. And I went into the blackness. The boyfriend thought I had gone. The house got cleaned up. I got put in the back room, on the bed, and everything was cleaned up, and I was out for 3 days. When I came back, I didn't know what had happened. 3 days later, the place was, I don't know if you've ever been into a meth house, but mate, we had rubbish everywhere, and everything was like the plastic on the windows, and it was disgusting. And I remember trying to clean it up at some point, like I wiped the walls, but I couldn't clean it. So everything had been cleaned up, and he's disappeared. And I'm like, this is 3 days later. Like, what the heck is going on? I had I had my phone, and I'm trying to ring him, and he's not answering. And I'm thinking, what the heck happened? I opened the fridge, everything was gone, and I'm in anxiety. I had no cigarettes, I had no gear. I'm shaking inside, and I put on my runners, and I took off. I ran down, and I ran outside, and where I was living, there was like an oval, and I ran across the oval. I don't know where I thought I was running, but I just wanted to get rid of this feeling. And I ended up across the road from the oval. There was an old vandalized church, and it was all like old and like writing and timber across the front, and the grass was all overgrown, the gate was broken, and the concrete towards into the old vandalized church was all broken, and I stood there and I'm like, who does this sort of disrespect, like to the house of God? But like what I think was happening, and I can only say this because I had a relapse 6 months down the track and went back, and it wasn't like that. But what I think I was seeing was, we have a spirit being inside this temple, inside this house, and I had utterly, absolutely destroyed it. I had vandalized it, and I think this was a reflection of me. But as I stepped into the gate and thought, this is disgusting. Like I had what some people call an epiphany.
Yeah.
I call it my encounter with God. Okay. A supernatural thing happened to me. I half thought I was going insane. I half thought I was in psychosis.
Yeah.
But a light appeared out of the sky. I was pinned down to the ground, and I heard God talk to me. And very, very clearly, and I was a mess. I was crying and thinking, what is going on? And thinking I'm going mad, but I was actually held on the ground. So I'm like, I started yelling out for help, but people weren't responding to my voice. And I'm thinking, oh, well, I must be in some sort of alien cylinder. This was my next thing to go to. And the voice spoke to me again, get up and go home, my child. I just, in a mess, said, I got no more home. Look at me. I was a shell of a being, but I had no home. I had no family. I didn't even know myself, let alone go home. And when I went into like a fetal position, I just cried, like my whole soul cried out, I had no more, when you cry so much and you can't cry anymore. I couldn't breathe anymore. I was just like there, and I'm like, I got no more strength. And the voice said to me, I'll give you strength. And I lifted up. I got up from there. The light was gone, and I'm like, okay, I just had a really bad psychosis, so I'm tripping out. I got to get home. I got to go home. And people call it, when one thing happens, one thing after another, and they all link up. A series of these things happen where I was clearly told, book your flights back home, and I didn't have money. I was struggling to eat at this point. I have nothing, and I had exactly $76 to get on a plane because the flight cost $76. I was like, what is going on? Like all these signs kept leading me to get on a plane, and I had a series of things that happened to me over the next few months that I half thought I was in psychosis and half thought I was going crazy. But I kept hearing God talk to me and lead me, and I locked myself up in my mum's second bedroom and I slept on the ground. I didn't want to be in a bed. I just didn't feel worthy. I felt like an animal. And, and I spent 3 weeks there. I'd come out to eat. And my poor mum, I'd be like, the devil's chasing me. He wants to kill me. And I've got to get to a church right now. They've got to pray for me quick. And I'd go into these, religious churches, and they'd be like, are you on drugs? I go, no, I was. I'm not now. You just got to pray for me like something's wrong. And I had this battle, it's in a battle going on, for my soul, whether I was going to go back, and the boyfriend's ringing me, and, my mind going insane, and the shame and the guilt, and it all came tumbling down. It was like a ton of bricks, I just wanted to die, Glenn. I just, I just didn't know how to get through that.
Period.
That was, I think, the hardest thing that I've ever done in my life.
I can imagine how it would be, and very scary time as well, Andrea. Was it actually two separate incidents, if that makes sense?
It was 2 separate days. I was getting direction on what to do next. And I was like, okay, I sent him a message. I said, don't come home. I'm leaving.
Yeah.
But
well, at that point, that was you. I'm now moving. I'm going back home. Yeah.
I had to.
Yeah.
I had to. I knew, I was getting direction on what I had to do next, and I knew that was my only way out.
That feeling and that encounter with God is something that's always intrigued me quite a lot. I watch a lot of them near-death videos, right? I wouldn't say I'm a religious person. I was brought up a Catholic. I would say I'm a really bad Catholic. I don't really go to church as much as I should. I believe there's somebody up there. There's a higher power than us. And I believe in right and wrong and doing good things. I'm very much on that path. But it's always intrigued me listening to them stories. Can you tell me a little bit more about that moment for you? Hearing that voice telling you, go home, my child. Were you frightened at the time? Was it a peace? What did that look like?
Yeah. I was pushed down on the floor onto my knees and then flat on my face. So
you were
this light came through the cross, because I looked up to see what kind of church does this, allows this grace. And I stepped back and I looked up and I saw a cross in a circle, and I thought, oh, this must be an Orthodox church. I went to a Catholic primary school, but I was not religious, In fact, I'm not religious now. But after that encounter, I chased down to try and find out what that was, because at first I thought I was going insane. But because I was pinned to the ground, it wasn't just in my mind, it was a physical thing. Right. So the light came out of the sky over me. I was pushed on my knees and then flat on my face. So I'm stuck on the ground, not being able to get up.
Oof.
And so if it was just something that I was hearing, and so I couldn't comprehend. I was thinking, have I lost my mind? And then I'm like, but no, I'm like, this is physical. What's going on? And so I started to yell out, help. And I saw a man and a lady pushing a pram. They were talking to each other and they would have been, I don't know, maybe 100 feet away.
Yeah.
And I'm yelling, help, help. And they were talking to each other and they didn't even look at me.
Yeah.
Right. So I went, okay, they can't hear me. And I'm in this white light cylinder. And I guess went into, this must be an alien encounter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Never in my wildest dreams would I have thought, this is God talking to me, let alone, like, it's so far detached from my life.
Yeah.
That kind of thought.
It's not something that you would have been thinking normally day to day. Like,
no, absolutely not. My first thing would be, I'm gone nuts, too much drugs, Andrea. And then the next thing was, okay, must be an alien encounter.
Yeah.
So I started pleading with what I thought was an alien encounter, right? Holding me down. But honestly, I was like I was in a white tube light, but it didn't hurt my eyes.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of peace in it. Absolutely. Especially when I got to the point where I said, I've got no more strength. And I cried and cried. And then I heard, I will give you strength. And the peace that just overcame me was something surreal. I had never experienced that before. And I got up and it was like I'd been hypnotized and I knew exactly what I needed to do. And I was just walking through the hoops of what was appearing before me as doors.
The clarity that you receive, you said you come back and you've just got that vision of what you need to do, even being able to find, the right amount of money to get that plane ticket home and that. It's such a powerful concept, Andre, that, something was pushing you to get the help that you needed.
It's not like I had like a vision of what I needed to do. It was like I was being prompted. It was
you're getting little signals.
Just like that, now book your flights.
Yeah.
Now go home and pack your stuff. I was just getting prompted. It was just, I couldn't not do it.
Yeah.
It was just like I was hypnotized and I was being prompted to do the next thing. And I couldn't not follow.
Yeah. So that little voice, that little prompt, it's obviously there for days, weeks, months later, is it? Helping you through?
There for 6 months, day and night. In fact, when I came home and I said to my mum, after I had started talking, telling her what was happening, and I'm like, Mum, God's talking to me. And she went, okay. And my sister was like, okay. And I was like, I didn't care. I didn't care what they thought. And then I went, maybe I should go to the hospital doctors and get myself checked. I'm going to, when they put the dye in your body and getting myself checked. Something's wrong with me. I want to get my brain checked. And then I wasn't satisfied. I went into the eye specialist and they put dye in my eye so they could check inside my eyes because I'm like, this is insane. Like, this is not like, is this really happening? Am I gone nuts, And, but there was nothing wrong with me, everything was like, it was just crazy. It was just, and the thing was, God kept talking to me for 6 months, and I went into some incredible places upon my return. I ended up was directed to go into a place called Reach Out, which was a ministry street church. And, I was told, here, you're going to find out who I am here. And it was a really amazing teacher there that was talking about, God and about, he was not non-denominational. He was just talking about who God is as a person. And I'm like, okay. So, but I kept meeting people that were trapped in addiction through this time. And then they tell me all their story and I'd be like, oh, I mean, I can relate. I was there. I went through that and I'm, 5 months clean or 4 months clean. And they go, oh, how did you get free from it? And I'm like, well, I think God helped me. I don't know. But, do you reckon he'd help me too? And I'm like, maybe. So I'd be meeting all these people and trying to help them. get clean, and giving them hope that, hey, I came out, you can do this too,
Yeah.
It was really surreal because that wasn't my world before.
Mm.
I didn't have people in that world. I was, involved in film and television. I was doing theatre. I had businesses. I had, a very fast-paced life. This was not my world,
So it was a totally new lane for you altogether, Andrea. Mm-hmm. Did you do any of the kind of step programs or anything like that there, or did you just do it solely all on your own?
What happened, before I got on a plane, I went to a friend's house, a lady that used to do my nails there in Melbourne, and I told her what was happening to me, and she's like, oh, you're losing it, Andrea. So she called her brother, and her brother lived in Queensland. Her brother is a drug and alcohol counsellor, but she said, she called him and said, look, I think Andrea's losing the plot. She's saying that she's hearing God and she's gone too far. And he said, he'd meet me on the other side when I got home. Yeah. He got in touch and suggested that I see a counsellor, a drug and alcohol counsellor. And I started off seeing her 3 times a week and she had no idea what I was going through. And then he started counselling me because he had been through it, now 40 years for him, clean time. So he started helping me with some counselling and I started to process some of the stuff. Yeah. And I went to NA once and I went to CMA, Crystal Meth Anonymous, and I didn't continue. And I called a rehab and I thought maybe I have to go to rehab, I just to get myself back. Yeah. Like I was a mess. Didn't know who I was anymore. Couldn't process all the stuff. My brain was still messy, And so I called this place and they said, oh, I think it was Fairhaven. And they said, yeah, you can't have a phone and you can't smoke and all this stuff. And I'm like, forget it. I'm not coming to jail. So I kind of ditched that. So I'm like, okay. And then I called, there was an ad in the paper that I saw. Do you like boating? I used to have a boat in my other life, right? So I was like, yep, that's me. And it said, if you need some counselling and reconnect to community and yourself. So I picked up my phone and I called this man called Russell and he said, great. We had a 2-hour conversation. I told him everything that I'd been through and he said, you can meet us at the pier. We go across to Stradbroke and we have a fun day. It's really lovely. So I went, okay, well, you can't remember. Your brain is, people think, oh, why can't you just get a job and get on with it? Well, you can't process. So I'd written it down, but I couldn't remember. And it was 8 years later. Yeah. I got a call from Russell one day and his name came up on my phone and it said Russell from sales. And I went, oh my God, I was supposed to meet him at the pier 8 years ago. But it just hit me then, and, but all the things that you think you would naturally do. I made an appointment to go and see that. I couldn't remember. I couldn't process the hippocampus in your brain where, it goes and retrieves memory and, and it processes things. It was not working.
Everything's so damaged so much. I remember I've spoke with a lot of psychologists over the year before with my father and then the psychosis episode. And the way one of the doctors explained the psychosis was because it was such a prolonged period, it was like the brain had been badly bruised and damaged, and it would take so long for it to recover before them thoughts would start becoming clearer, before you could start putting things together again. It sounds very much like you were going through a very similar process after the prolonged period of using the ice. Whenever the prompts from God stops 6 months later, is that a concern? I'm imagining that them little nuggets of wisdom and guidance of where to go on that would be very beneficial, and then they're gone at one point. Was that a scary transition whenever that kind of stopped, or was that like?
It didn't happen like that, Glenn. I decided to go back to Melbourne and help the man that I loved. I did love him. We were entrapped in a very bad world, I call it ice world. And so I went back down there with a plan and I had spoken to him on the phone. Yes, we're going to stop. We're not going to do that. Please just come back. We're going to get our stuff together. We're going to move to Queensland. So I went back to Melbourne to pack down and to come back. And the very first night he pulled out an ice pipe and I said, I can't do this anymore. That's not me. And he said, I'm just going to finish this lot and we won't go there again. Yeah. And I couldn't not help him do that. And so I distinctly remember God saying to me, no. And I went, oh, it's just the last bit of it. We're not going to do it again. And then I got no a second time when I lit the next pipe. And I was like, we won't ever do it again. I promise you, this is like the last time. And then I got, no, 3 times. And then talking to me. But by that time I was already in the other world. And it took another 4 months. I got stuck there for 4 months. And then I remember standing in an empty room and I was crouched in a corner naked and I was crying and I was thinking, how did I get here again? And then I'm like, oh, it just dawned on me. I don't know. God, you're not talking to me anymore, and I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, help me. I don't know how to get out. And I couldn't actually think about how to get out. And I received a message, a text message, a Facebook message, actually, a messenger from a cousin of mine that I hadn't spoken to for 25 years. And he sent me a picture of an angel that had a broken wing and was on the ground. He said, do you know who this is? And I said, why are you contacting me now? And I was literally on the ground and looking at this phone. And he said, do you know who this is? And I said, no, what do you want? And he said, I know you've been crying out to God and you're a mess. And he said, this is you. And he said, I'm praying for you. And I'm like, I told him where to go. I said, go away. You don't know me. You don't know my life now. And I dismissed it. And I went into the lounge room and my boyfriend had gone, he crashed because you go days on end and then you crash, right?
Yeah.
He crashed. And I went into the lounge room and I sat in the dark and I'm like, okay, God's not talking to me anymore. I'm in a bigger mess than I was. What do I do? So I did the next best thing that I thought to do, which is I lit a candle and I got on my knees and I started to beg God to talk to me. And I said, I'm so sorry. I spat on the plate you gave me. You gave me every opportunity to get better. And I went back. I need you. And it felt like I was begging forever.
Yeah.
And he repeated, God spoke and he repeated, get up and go home, my child. And I went, yes, sir. And I got up and I knew what I had to do. And the next morning I said, I'm leaving. This is not for me. I'm not living this life. And he said, oh, we'll change. I said, no, I've heard it. I'm not doing it. I'm going. And so he tried. I remember it was near Valentine's Day. He took me out on a horse and carriage and we went to dinner and all of this. Please, we'll change. I said, no, I'm done. I don't belong here. I don't want to do this anymore. If you want to change, you need to get your life together. I'm out. I'm gone. It took me 7 days to get home and I didn't use. I had tasted within the 6 months something amazing.
Yeah.
I tasted recovery. I tasted, I guess becoming the real me. The life I lived married, I wasn't free.
Yeah.
I wasn't the person that I needed to be. And then I had tasted who I could be, which was authentic. I had tasted an amazing relationship with God that I never imagined. And also some beautiful people came into my life trying to help me. I had met some people along the way, from the counselor guy to other people that organically befriended me and who became one of the guys was a lot older than me. He was an old musician, Australian actor. And we met and I'm like, I'll never forget this. One night I just wanted to die. I couldn't do it. It was too hard. It all become too much. The mess that I created was so big and I couldn't process. I couldn't work it out. My emotions were going crazy. I'm like, I just can't do this life. I can't do it. I'm better off dead. I wanted to die. And this guy would ring me at the right time, when I was in my worst, at my lowest. And he rang me this time and he said, I'm coming to pick you up tomorrow. We're going to go and help Mr. and Mrs. Jones. She's got cancer. And listen, mate, I said, stop annoying me. Leave me alone. I want to die. Which part of that don't you understand? I'm not doing life anymore. I don't want to do it. And he said, no, listen. He said, don't die today. Die tomorrow. Today, we're going to go and help. And I'm like, what's the matter with this dude? I'll pick you up. I'll be there. He had a Porsche. He was happy and, he was going to church, an actor, and he was a musician. And he's like, we're going to go to the studio, make some music. I go, mate, I don't do that anymore. I'm not that person anymore. And I'd be angry and down and suicidal. And he'd be like, mate, just listen to this song. And then if you don't like the song that I've written, you can leave, okay? Yeah. Just come with me to the studio. So I'd go there and I'd sit there, with a sad face. And then I'd hear the music and I'd go, mate, if you put a drum section in there, and then what about if I write some words for that? And then he started to, he hooked in on my passion. He hooked in on something that was within me, a dream, a love that even though I wasn't feeling anything anymore, he hooked in until I did start to feel again.
Yeah.
And I often say to him, you're part of the reason why I'm alive today.
Yeah.
You hooked in and you didn't take no for an answer. And we call that a buddy. So that's today in our organization, that's what the buddy does. The buddy walks alongside this person that's in early recovery.
That second 4 months, was it different this time because of what you had seen and the glimpse that you had? Was it harder? Did you find yourself being more severe on yourself because of that kind of second episode? Does that make sense?
Well, I think that initially I didn't want to use the second time. I didn't plan to do that. And then him using without me, I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
So it was just, I'll just help him finish this lot and then we won't be doing that anymore. But it just took over.
Yeah.
And that's that. Why, our T-shirts and our slogan is not even once. Don't go there. You don't need to. You don't need to know what it feels like. You don't. The road that you walk when you embark on that journey, it's a road to destruction. It's a road to hell, and the end of that road ends up. You're either going to end up in mental health institutes, you're going to end up in prison, or even dead.
There's very few circumstances where it improves anybody's life.
I haven't known one.
No, I don't. I've never heard of a story either. How long after your second episode, you said that your friend was reaching out, he was taking you, it was helping you have that purpose again or find that passion so that you could see that future life. How long does that process, would you say, from where you stop using the second time to you start seeing light at the end of the tunnel for yourself and getting to a fairly good place? How long's that journey for you?
I think it was a process, and it almost felt like, and crashes, and I'd be like, okay, I think I'm getting myself together, and then I'd crash, and when I'd crash really hard, I'd think about taking my life. I was not in a good place, and I kept doing this. But what I found was, as time went on, the gaps between crashes started getting wider. And I started to think clearer. Around a year, it took about a year before I stopped wanting to die.
Yeah. Which is a long time to be feeling that way. It's definitely too long to start feeling like you wanted to start living again and you wanted to be present. I'm guessing it takes a little bit of time to rebuild relationships and make amends to people that you maybe for going AWOL and things like that. I'm guessing that was quite a hard process for you as well.
Yeah, that was extremely difficult. And in fact, I've been clean for 13 years and I still don't have a relationship with my oldest daughter. There are consequences to our actions, and some are long term. Often when I get speak in schools, I talk about, relationships. A lot of times, family members will be forgiving and they might, accept a new start or forgive what you've put them through or done. But some of the things that you can't take back are things like, for me, kidney damage, heart problems. These aren't my teeth. I lost a lot of my front teeth were ground back, from using ice. I've known people that are not alive today, and some things you can't take back.
Yeah, the not being able to take things back is hard, and I'm guessing that it's a case of having to find a way to be okay with that, is it? Myself and my father have a relationship that I would say is strange. It's not the relationship I would want with my father, put it that way. I'm guessing that there comes a point where you just have to decide, okay, the relationship is the way it is and I'm moving forward with my life. What advice would you have for somebody that maybe has that regret at this stage?
I think that there's a scripture in the Bible and it says, which I now read consequently after my experience, and it says the price of sin is death, right? And it doesn't mean like death to the physical body, right? But if you walk down this path, there are consequences in life, and you just better be aware of what the consequences are of the choices we make, which is why our organization does what it does today, is warning the youth about the consequences of their choices. You can't stop somebody from taking certain choices or using certain drugs or destroying their life if they want to, but they better be ready for some of the consequences, because some of the consequences you can't take back.
Yeah.
Now, that was the price of the choices I made, and which I can't take back. I can't undo the kidney damage. I can't undo the heart issues. But today, I use that, I guess, in my talk when I go and talk to kids. I wish that some of these things didn't happen, but it's also I've become a different person through some of these things. And one of my sisters, her husband got on a drug called Shabu many years before I even went down this path. And I remember saying, what's wrong with you? Like, why don't you just leave him and that's not a life. That's not a life. He's insane. Like, and Shabu is actually ice as well in a different name. But I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to help him. I didn't know this world. So, it's easy to judge from the outside.
Yeah.
Oh, you stupid woman, everybody knows don't do drugs. Like, whoopee, great, good on you, mate. Like, it's easier to say that.
It's not beneficial at the time.
It's just not what happens. Things are progressive. In fact, I had the conversation with a team today. I said, people just don't wake up and go, I'm gonna be a drug addict when I get older, or I'm gonna be a drug dealer or a prostitute because I need drugs or whatever. One thing leads to another, and you wake up there one day. I sold drugs to a lady who had 3 kids because I needed the money because by selling, she wanted it. She was going to buy it anyway, but inadvertently I became the drug dealer, didn't I? I couldn't see that at the time, but that's where I ended up. And a lot of the people that we've worked with, they start off using and then they're like, oh, I don't know where to get more money from. But if I sell it to that guy, then I can get twice as much and then I'll make some money and they'll be able to, and you end up there, So it's not a choice like that, you wake up
combination of lots of choices that you're not aware of at the time. Yeah, no, I get that.
You're aware, but you're not able to process logic, rational decisions. See, what you'll find and what most people don't know the details of is that the National Ice Task Force report in Australia was written 2015 by our government, and it explains ice is like no other drug because of what it does to the frontal lobe. It hijacks the frontal lobe of the brain, leaving the person using not capable of using logic, rational decisions, right? So their processing center is not working. So it also states that it takes 12 to 18 months for the chemicals in the brain to restabilize properly again before the person is operating in their right mind.
Yeah.
So our current government have dropped rehab to 3 months. I get really mad because I go, it took me a year to land and not be suicidal. What's 3 months? Not even going to touch the side. What are we lacking to see here when, chemically speaking, the brain takes
You're still not in a place where it can get help. As you mentioned, if we're only given 3 months of support, that's not long enough and it's not thing. Tell me a little bit more about the work your organisation does at the minute. Tell our listeners where it is, where they can find you and what you're doing out there at the moment.
So I was a year and a half in recovery, and I distinctly remember the day that I said, my life feels like I've landed and, what can I do to help? I had a lot of really strange things happen to me in my life. I was filming people who had a similar experience to me where they had, a supernatural thing happen to them. And I'm like, wow, I was intrigued by this, like I was like, how did this happen? So I started filming somebody from Melbourne that came. He was going to throw himself off a building and he had an encounter with a light and God spoke to him too. And I'm thinking, wow, like this actually, I'm not weird. This is happening. So I started filming this guy talking and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to find more people that had this encounter and I'm going to, try and get to the bottom of this.
Yeah.
So I called it a channel on YouTube called Encounters with God. And I finished uploading my first project and it was 1:00 in the morning. And then I blacked out for 2 hours. And when I came back, I had a petition on change.org finished with a letter to the Federal Health Minister. And it had the vision of what we do today, awareness, education in schools, community support, and everything was written there. And I'm like, wow, we need to curb the ice epidemic and plan on how to do that. And a letter to the Federal Health Minister. And I'm like, okay. And I saw a big sign and it said action now. By this time it was 3:00 in the morning. So I clicked on it and I went to sleep. And the next morning I had a call from a man and he said, did you do that petition on change.org? I said, yep, I think so. And he said, well, I think it's brilliant. He said, put it in writing and I'm the Federal Health Minister's best friend. I'll give it to him personally. Wow. I hung up from that and I went, okay, God. I should have been dead a year ago. Is this what you want me to do? And I started putting one foot in front of the other. and following suit. And then I was called to talk at a school, 180 year 10 students, and I saw the impact of my story on them. I was raw, I was real. I'm like, I don't want you to make the same mistakes I did. I want you to know what's going to happen to you. And I exposed it. Then I spoke to the meth project in America, and I saw their commercials, and I went, this is fantastic. We've got to get this out here. So I put a plan together, and they gave me their school education, and they said, run, go, do it in Australia. And so I started to share this education in the schools.
Brilliant.
And along with my story, right? So when I'd show, you can have psychosis, mate. No, let me tell you about psychosis. So I'd be showing stuff, and then I'd be helping other people across my path that, were on drugs, and they're like, oh, do you think can you help me get clean too? And I'll go, yeah, I think so. Maybe you need to go to rehab, and I'd like hook them up with a counselor, and I'd be like, hey, I'm going to check on you tomorrow. And I'd be walking with these people. And then, it went viral, like the petition went viral. I got contacted by news.com, and they wanted to know my story, and then it hit all the news, and I was called to go in on the morning show and a current affair in 60 minutes. And by this time I trained all these other people that I'd helped, and I trained them all up to, I put a call to action out in the news, and I said, if this is you and you want to help the problem, get on board with me, contact me. And the phones went crazy. So I trained all these people up to go into schools and talk to the kids like I was with the workshop. And then all these other people were like, well, I'm helping this guy because they called and they wanted help. Our organization grew from that. And it was just my room on a plastic table. I remember I didn't have enough money because I was on Centrelink, and I didn't have enough money to start anything. But I thought, okay, do I order business cards to go and see some important people about this, or do I buy food? And I'm like, business cards. So I went and bought business cards, and my mum said, you got no food in the fridge, girl? And I'm like, yeah, I've got to do something about this. This is why I'm still alive. So this organization was birthed. I got contacted by a man who I had known from the film industry, and he said, oh, I heard you made a commercial about, I had put together a template on still frame of a commercial for domestic violence that I wanted to sell to 1-800-RESPECT. And I wanted them to finalize it and air it, to help people, 1-800-RESPECT. Because I went through domestic violence, right? So I put together this in my downtime year of recovery. I put this commercial together, and I activate people. I was like, all right, guys in the film industry, I want to do this. Will you get on board? Yep, everybody's on board. That makeup artist, the studio, everybody came in with cameras, and it was all on. So we filmed this, but I did nothing with it. So I got this call from this guy saying, you made a commercial for domestic violence. I said, oh yeah, it's still on my computer. And he says, well, I know this man, he's starting a domestic violence organization, and he could really do that. Will you speak with him? I said, sure. So I went over to see him, and this man ran an organization for kids that were getting taken off families because a lot of drug addiction was happening, and they were housing these children. He had this beautiful office, and it was like SMIC, and it had upstairs, and it had like a golf course and a mini putt-putt. And I'm like, wow, in this boardroom with all these chairs. And I sat there, and he's like, so you got this commercial? I said, yeah. And he said, what do you want to do with it? And I said, oh, you can have. I said, I'm on another mission. And he looked at me and he said, what, you just want to give it to me? And I said, yep. I showed it to him, right? And I said, you can have it. Go and do good with it, right? Yeah. And I said, I'm on another mission. And he said, what are you doing? And I told him my story. And then I left. And this man, I got a call from his secretary, and he said, John wants to see you tomorrow. Can you come back at 9 a.m.? I said, sure. And I'm thinking, what does he want? I've already given him the commercial. He said, in my culture, we believe that the water comes down the mountain, and then as it flows on, you've got to contribute to it, and it comes back around. And he said, and so what if I offered you offices here, computers, a secretary, legal firm, and everything was given to me? Even the legal people made the organization into proprietary limited. He goes, how do you structure this? I go, I don't know. I'm just like following my nose. Yeah. I said, I've run companies, like proprietary limited companies. He goes, that's fine. We'll set it up. So the organization then grew, and we had offices in every state in Australia, and I had no idea what I was doing, but I knew that, we were going to change lives. And I knew that by speaking truth in love and getting in front of these kids, we could somehow show them the devastation of those choices. And I was hoping that if we could just get one kid not to make a choice like I had, that it was going to be worth it.
To see one family going through what you'd gone through in your family, Andrea, it's such a powerful calling and such a powerful thing that you're doing with those kids. And I know you've helped way more than one family at the moment. You must be on thousands at this stage.
I've learned the art of duplication, Glenn. And so by helping people and then saying, you can do this too, You can use what tried to destroy you for good, and I'll train you up myself. And then, having teams across Australia do this and going into schools and raising awareness and sharing their stories. I didn't see it for years, but it was a double-edged sword, where it was giving hope to those coming into recovery, getting hope that they could use that one day and actually matter and part of society, do good and be able to rebuild themselves in a way where they were of use and giving back. And then also helping the kids understand the devastations and the side effects and the long-term lingering effects of their choices.
Yeah.
So it was a win-win-win situation as far as I could see. And I'll never forget, I went to see Susan Lee, and she said, so you're employing people that otherwise wouldn't be employed, and by giving them hope to be employed to go and do something to help community. I'm like, yeah, I guess so. And she said, we've got to find discretionary funding for that. That's wonderful. And she was blown away by what had happened, and I couldn't look at what was happening because I just cared about the next school and the next kid.
Yeah.
And, that's how it began. And then it went really viral. And then COVID hit us, and I didn't have infrastructure to employ our team leaders in different states. It was all voluntary.
Yeah.
For 8 years, I lived on Centrelink on my back going, when are you going to get a job? I'm like, I can't. I'm on a mission. Got to do this. You don't understand. And I'd get small jobs here and there. I'd go clean houses and do things to get by. We were on a mission, and we had they go, you can't stay on Centrelink and have teams across Australia like this. I go, well, I don't know how to change it. You know how to make this financial. I just know what we need to do. So it evolved, and then COVID came and we couldn't sustain it. So it came down to just Queensland. I kind of allowed all the other states to close like their offices, but we've still got satellite people trained across Australia. We've got over 140 buddies across Australia who have lived experience, who've got recovery and that are able to help other people in other states. Went on to start to rebuild after COVID, and we were in the corporate centre, and our roof collapsed and we got flooded with the flooding. We lost all of our equipment. We were in the mines at that time. We had to stop operations because we had no resources. We had nothing, computers and everything. So it took us about 4 months to rebuild again. So we rebuilt again, and we got things up and running again. And I had an incident in the hospital. I went in for a sinus surgery, a day surgery thing. And they gave me fentanyl for pain, and I flatlined and died twice in 2 days. The lack of oxygen that I had to my brain at that time caused a lot of speech impediment, the incapacity to read and write, and staggered thought processes. I couldn't think properly. And I was told, my family was told I had brain damage from the incident because of the lack of oxygen. I knew that I wasn't thinking straight, but I was still in there. I just couldn't talk properly. And I'm like, okay, I remember I've rebuilt my brain before from Ice World. The neurological pathways are damaged, and it took 12 to 18 months for me to be able to think straight again. And I knew that there's neuroplasticity. Your brain won't be the same, but you can rebuild it in a different way. Yeah. And so I had found that the way that helped me the most was through music. So because my buddy at the time gave me a keyboard, I said, I don't do this anymore, and I don't play keyboard anyway. I used to play guitar, but those days are gone. And he said, well, just have it anyway. Yeah. And so I kept having an eye affair with the keyboard, and one day I got on there and I realized that this helped my neurological pathways. It strengthened that a lot quicker than I would have otherwise. So because I was in a space now where I had damaged my brain, and I'm like, okay, I've done this before, I can do it again. So I got on my keyboard and I started to write. I started to write music. I went into a recording studio. I recorded my second album now. My first album's called Highway Destruction, and it was my story in music. Yeah, brilliant. It's an EP out on my record label that I have formed, and I'm onto my third song. I finished my third song on that in the studio, ready for my second album. So getting back on the keyboard helped me a lot quicker. Get things back on track a lot faster. And then we rebuilt. I wasn't sure what was going to happen, whether the organisation was, the board was carrying it. We had a lot of work in the youth prison, and the board kept carrying everything for about 6 months. And then they tricked me. Some of my team were like, oh, we just want a small space that we can print some stuff and send it off. And, I'm like, well, I'm not going to work in there because I can't do this again. I've really tried to do this twice again. And so bit by bit, I ended up in the office, didn't I? Because my heart couldn't say no.
Yeah.
And today we have now rebuilt, we have an op shop in the middle of Southport, which is Ice World in Queensland. We have an op shop, and inside there we have our offices, corporate offices, and we have buddies all over Australia that are helping people, but we work a lot. Predominantly, we're working full-time in the youth prison. So we go in there and we do workshops. One of our guys does workshops. We do about 5 a week. And then we have our buddies going in there to do interventions with kids. And by choice, out of 60 programs, these kids are choosing ours. Like they can choose soccer or anything else, art or music, and they're choosing our program. And so our intervention program is, we share our stories with them and they share theirs, and then we offer them a glimpse of hope and support to change their life. And then they've just employed a transition officer through us so that when the youth are ready to get out, they have the wraparound service to bring them out.
Yeah.
And so we're doing that pretty heavily, invested in there with youth justice. But we're seeing a gap because some of these kids are like 14 to 17. The first young man I went in to see, they thought he'd last 5 minutes with me, and 45 minutes later, this young fella is like, I want this. I prayed with him. I said, do you have faith? Because God, God's amazing. And he said, yeah, of course I do. And I'm like, hey, I said, because I want to help you. And when our time came up, they knocked on the door when to go, and he got up and he went to the door and he did a double take, and he came running back and he put his arms around my neck and he says, thank you. And then they asked if I would go back and see him a second time, but this time he wanted to bring his brother. So there's 4 jail. Now these kids are going back into community after doing crime because they're lost, because they've got parents in addiction. They've got, they've got no homes. And so I'm like, okay, well, how do we get more buddies around these kids and train more people? But now we're looking at, I'm looking at seriously putting a plan together to put a transition home in place for youth coming out of the detention centre, because they need hope. They need somewhere to land. This is now, and I did warn our government about this. I said, what we're creating is a funnel problem issue. If we're not stopping kids from falling into this
back into the same trap
addiction, we're going to have 2 and 3 generations deep, and we're right there now.
I can remember the conversation with Simon, and Simon had told me his journey with ICE ended up taking him to prison after 8 years. And whenever he got out, the halfway house that they put him in was basically a crack house, he said. So it was like he had to white knuckle it, and he had to get out of there and ask his brother to get him in somewhere else. But he said that transition, I think he was early 40s at that stage, but that transition was a really challenging time for him. And he said that's where he currently works now in this space as well, trying to help people through it. So you're definitely spot on whenever you say that transition is something that we can do better as a society. And the good work that you're doing in there is definitely a credit to you, Andrea, and your team.
It's the least I could do. I figure I've been given 3 chances to do life again. And, I was speaking to a young lady today, and she said, it's amazing what you've done. And I go, it's the least I could do. I want to leave this world when my time comes, and I want to be able to have contributed to it. If I had to fall hard to learn what not to do, but then I can go back and help other people not go down that path.
From my mistakes.
If I didn't. If I've walked down a path you're about to step into it and you're going to fall down a ditch, and I've already broken my leg on that, it'll be the same for me. Hey, don't go down that road, The purpose, I want to leave something sustainable. I want to leave something that can continue helping people. I've made $1 million at the age of 21. I've had everything we can buy. That didn't fill the gap in my heart. We're called for something. We're called to do something that matters. We're called to connect and to make a difference in each other's lives, and it took me 44 years to find that out. And, seeing other youth put their hand up, 8 a fortnight, to put their hand up to want change in their life, having anywhere to bring them out to is like heartbreaking. But being a part of being able to help them change that, change the directive of their future at a young age is an absolute privilege.
Yeah, no, I can understand that feeling of helping and supporting other people and how rewarding it can be. What advice would you have for any of our listeners at the moment that maybe either have a family member or maybe they're struggling with some form of addiction themselves? What advice would you have for them?
Well, there's two different cohorts of people here that you've explained. So if I'm talking to family members, families, please get some training, get some support. You know, we have an online training called Substance Abuse and Mental Health Intervention. It's on our website. Anyone can go on there and download it. And it teaches you how to have that conversation with your loved one that might be in addiction. It teaches you about the cycle of addiction, what that looks like. Get educated, get some support. You're not alone in this. You know, a lot of times families, like my mum, she didn't know what to do. We'd never experienced this. You know, you just love your kid and you're trying to tell them what not to do. You know, that ain't going to work. You know, they're lost in a ice world. But, you know, let us walk with you and help you with some tools and educate you on how to get alongside your loved one and how put some nice fences of love around yourself and guard your heart because, you know, the road can be bumpy, but if you allow them and give them the choice to make that change, a lot of time, no person wants to sit in that devastation and the hell. There comes a time, which we call contemplation stage in that cycle of addiction, that they come to the end. This hurts too much. I've got to do something. I've got to break out. I have to change this. And that's the time when, if you're ready and you can have the right conversation and have the path planned on what to do, that's the time you can actually hold your loved one's hand
support.
Into the right pathway. Many families trying to save their loved ones with, don't do that. That's killing you. That's hurting you. Look what you're doing to me. That person's not even there. You're talking to
doesn't help.
Addiction, you know. It's all in the timing of the cycle of addiction. It's all in allowing them to make that choice, and we can help you. We can help you work through that. If we're talking to the person in addiction, and as I say that, I tear up because I think about me talking to me. Yeah, that stuff will kill you. It'll destroy your soul more than kill you. It eats you away at the person that you were. And, you know, you may think that you're okay right now and that it's not hurting you, but long term, it's going to destroy you and your family and people you love. And I know that at the time that you're using, you don't care. But if you happen to see this and you're in some sort of question stage or you can look at your life and say, this is not where I wanted to be. This is not what supposed to happen to me. This was not where I was aiming to go down. Reach out for help. Because, you know, everyone in our organization, all of our buddies have lived experience. We've been there. We know the way out. We have the tools to help you. And, you know, you can make a decision today to turn that around. Today. To change it. You don't know what it's going to look like tomorrow, you know, but I never in my wildest dreams thought I'd be running international now, because we've worked in Africa, we've got call from Liberia and other countries. We're working in an international, running an international charity, non-for-profit organization, and helping so many people, like, and this will be you. I don't have any special qualification. Like, you can make those decisions now, you know, and turn the path. You know, you might be in a fork in the road, and making a choice to change means picking up the phone and asking for support. Hey, I want out of this life. And we have a 1-800 number. It's called 1-800-NO-TO-ICE. No, TOICE. And you can call anywhere in Australia and somebody will give you a call back if they don't answer, because it's not a 24-hour service. But we will call you back. We'll appoint you a buddy to help you and help you create that pathway into a life worth living. Because the life you're living now in addiction is not a life worth living. It's not your book. So
I really like what you said, that them little signals that we all get at different stages of our lives, that something is not quite right. We're not where we're meant to be. Yours came in your version, but for other people, it will be slightly different. But once they realize that this isn't where I should be, I need help, I don't want to do this anymore. That was really my intention behind the Feck It No More point, because at that point, and pretty much everybody I've talked to, once they hit that point and they start seeking and getting curious about how to get help or how to change and how to improve their life, that they can't unknow that information. And it might take some people a week, it might take some people 6 months, it might take some people 6 years. But once they kind of have seen them little glimpses of what I don't want my life to look like, and that's whenever you can really start opening up to what is the potential. And look, you've turned your life around completely. You've went on to do some amazing things, and the work that you continue to do to help other people, that ripple effect with all the buddies that's out there is having a massive impact, not just on the people you're helping, but on the families of the people they're helping and the families of their futures as well. So I just want to take a moment and acknowledge and congratulate you on that amazing work, Andrea. And as I said, if there's anything that I can ever help on your journey, I certainly will do. So please continue to be a friend of the show and keep in contact with us, because I have really appreciated your time this evening for the chat. Are you okay if people reach out directly? Like, where's the best place to actually find? Have you got links that you want me to share in the show notes?
Yeah, that would be great if you could share we have a Facebook page.
Yep.
Are very active. There's always somebody, one of our buddies is always on there.
Perfect.
Answering, questions, or I'm on there a lot as well. But yeah, people can reach out on any of our socials. Also on our webpage.
Yeah.
So we have a little chat box, which goes to our messenger, and that's at australianantiicecampaign.org.au.
Awesome. What I'll do is I'll put the links in the show notes as well, so people can find you nice and easy.
Apart from the education that we do, we also leave behind with the teachers some training. So we offer community the opportunity to I'm happy to, I get to talk in a lot of different areas to share my story and offer some training for people in community that would like to be part of making a change in their community. I hear a lot of people saying, oh, there's a lot of people on drugs in my street. I don't know how to help them. We have a training for that. And so it's a 2-hour online training, that we can provide for people in community to learn how to have that conversation with people that might be in addiction and how to help them create a pathway to our care team. If people want to onboard, please contact us.
Yeah.
We're happy. And that's online. You can do it in your own home.
In your own time. At your own time.
We have a YouTube channel called Let's Talk About Ice.
Good. Yeah.
And I sat and interviewed on our live show 7 years worth of stories of people who have been through addiction and come out the other side. It was family members. We've interviewed counsellors, therapists, but mainly people who'd been through the journey in hope to raise awareness. It was an on-the-camera session, very formal, like asking all the questions. We're just starting that again with a different host, one of our guys who's been through addiction and is now a couple of years clean. The reason for that was for people to see themselves in that story or see their child in that story and go, okay, so that's what worked for them. Maybe I can try that. And we encourage, youth to go and have a look at it. We also have a free ebook that people can download off our webpage, and it's a video ebook, and it's a compilation of different stories, how people got on into addiction, what happened, what psychosis was like. It's a compilation of videos that people can download and share with their kids.
I think that educational aspect of anything in life, the knowing what can go wrong, at least allows us the information to make decisions at the time that might be beneficial. And as you said, if we can prevent one person from going down that hard journey where there takes them to somewhere where they don't want to go, that's better for that person than having to help them at the other side of it. It's important that we help them at the other side of it, but if we can prevent people getting there, it's a big part of what you're sort of doing. So what's the name of the YouTube channel?
Let's Talk About Ice.
Let's Talk About Ice. I encourage everybody to get over and have a look at that. Andrea, thank you so much for giving up such amount of time tonight, but also the last 12 years to help and support other people on this journey as well. It is something that hasn't gone unnoticed. As I say, as soon as I seen your story, I wanted to have this chat. So thank you so much for giving up your time tonight and having that conversation.
Thank you for being part of raising awareness. And the reason we share these stories is that it can help someone out there. So thank you so much for what you do and continuing to, not only my story, but, to educate people and help share some of these stories so people can be encouraged and hopefully make a difference in their life. So thank you, Glenn.
No, thank you, Andrea. And now for the legal part. I'm not a registered mental health professional. I'm just some guy who has gone through life, that's dealt with a lot of issues, and that has really wanted to move his life from where it was to where he wanted to go. And along that journey, with my own personal development, with my own growth, I've done a lot of research and studying into what it takes to get us to a better place. what it took to get me to a better place. I've also done a certificate in results coaching that qualifies me to coach other people in terms of improving their lives. But I want to stress, regardless of whether you go to a mental health professional or whether you go and talk to a friend down the road or whether you reach out to the Feck It No More team, the onus is definitely on you to help improve your life. And I want to thank you for showing up today, for listening, for getting involved. That shows that you care about your growth and your development and getting you to a better place. And I really appreciate the time that you have taken to reach out. So until the next time, I'll be waiting. I'll be available to help, support, as I know majority of our community will be too. And I thank you from the bottom of my heart for you showing up.